Welcome to another Gamma Partner Artist Feature interview. Today we speak with Empress Trash. Empress speaks on her journey, her inspirations, how art is therapy, but also just a great way for her to play and have fun, color, glitching, the female form, and more. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Okay, so very excited to have Empress Trash with us today, a Gamma Partner Artist for another Gamma Partner Artist feature. Funnily enough, I met Empress in Miami last year during Art Basel, and I was super aware of her work prior, but it was lovely to meet her in person. And now she's dropped work on Gamma, and we are here speaking. So enough from me. Let's hear from Empress Trash. So Empress, introduce yourself, tell your story. Where did it start? You can go back as far as you like from, pre even dropping NFTs. Like, how did you get interested in art and creating to now?
Yeah. Well, it's a long story, the pre NFTs to now. And also it was great meeting you in Miami. We met when I was helping Vandalo Ruins get his permissionless toter gallery into the Maker's Place / your event.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate putting up with our shenanigans pretty much. That's like a number one requisite to being someone who I work with. Yeah, so the being an artist, Jesus, I've been doing art my whole life. I'm gonna just go through the whole thing. I started as early as I can remember drawing and writing. I actually was nonverbal early in life, and half autism, half trauma. I still don't know which. So I really just would be in my own world and draw all the time. And plus my home life was really horrible. And so it was my escape. And I realized early on I could hide, I could express myself but still hide myself in what I was drawing. And it was a safe space for me to be able to process some of the stuff going on for me. And I always attribute art to really saving my life at an early age because of that. At 13 I left home, I emancipated myself, I became a legal adult, and I moved in with a family friend, and they're a more affluent family in the small town I grew up in. And they really encouraged me to do art. like um they saw, I mean, by that time, I mean, I was more social, and I was in therapy because I part of my court ordered stuff was you're going to be a legal adult but you have to do therapy until you're 18. I was, I almost dropped out of high school when I was a freshman, and then I got myself back together moving in with them because life wasn't so chaotic. And they really pushed me to do art. And at they pushed me actually to go to a private art school in Minneapolis, which everything I went through and everything, and then turning 18 and going into that private art school, it didn't work. It's just coming from only a few years in normalcy, and coming from abject poverty and a horrible situation, and then trying to be in an elite art setting. It just was too radical of a shift for my little 18-year-old brain to handle. So I ended up dropping out, and it was actually shortly after 9/11 that I dropped out of private art school. And then I spent my 20s just partying and just doing a lot of dumb stuff. And I still was working on art the whole time, but I just never shared it with people. And then at some point I decided to get myself together a little bit more, not such a party girl. And I went back to college because I realized the issue the whole time was the private art school. So I went back and I got my degree at the University of Iowa. It's a public university. They had a lot more support for students that come from my background. They actually gave me I love talking about this, but they gave me I had two advisors. I had my academic advisor and I had a life advisor, which was because of I told the school like my special situation I was coming from, and they actually gave me like a second advisor to teach me just how to manage life, because I didn't know how to do any of that. And I also got full health benefits, and so they like had me with like their psychiatric place too. So it was like there was support on every level. On like private art school, it was just like everyone doing heroin and like just like elitist stuff, which I just like I couldn't. I just didn't want that. I wanted to like focus on art, and I wanted to focus on making my life better, not just party like that. Even though I did party in my 20s. So then yeah, I got my BFA. I graduated top of my class from the University of Iowa. I graduated with honors, all the like fancy little stamps that you can have. And I moved immediately out to the Bay Area. And in the Bay Area, I was lucky enough that I was dating someone at the time who was somewhat like really supportive of my art career. And so she supported me for the first few months when I was in the Bay Area, and I got an internship at the Claude Art Institute there, where I was an art sales intern. And from there, my life kind of split, where it was like I was really focused on like the business side of art, but then I still was trying to be a fine artist. So a lot of my work, I ended up working in tech for a while, like in like curation and art sales, and like high-end furniture sales, which is akin to art sales. And then but then I also was working on my art. And at some point that divide like got too much, and I ended up quitting. I decided to quit tech. And I became a barista part-time and just was working on my art, because that's what I cared about more than the business side necessarily. And I just felt my like kind of my art side getting lost. And from there I was working in art collective by Tom Franco, who is one of the famous Franco brothers, but he has an art collective in Berkeley and Oakland called the Firehouse Art Collective. So I was working with him, and I really learned a lot about community building with him, and how to bring artists together and how to work with a lot of different artists, because all of us have our idiosyncrasies and all of that stuff, and we're all insane. Like is the nice way to put it. So there is a skill in learning how to deal with especially a lot of different artists that I really did learn from him. And to rewind too, like part of the Claude Art Institute thing, I ended up working with Ai Weiwei on his show on Alcatraz, assembling Lego portraits of prisoners of conscience. So like it was like I went out to the Bay Area and I immediately was working with like big names, which was like super cool, but the money wasn't always there in sales. Like I started selling paintings here and there, but that's why I had a barista. And at some point I decided to start running underground shows in my old punk house in West Oakland. And from that, I was able to start making more sustainable income. And we would do fundraisers for the community, but then also it brought enough awareness to my art. Like I started being able to sell things more and actually pay my rent with like my paintings. And then like a lot of us, COVID hit and the Bay Area was locked down super bad. And so I ended up we had to stop all of that, and for safety of the community, we didn't want to be like there's a lot of dynamics at play when it comes to running underground things in Oakland, but this was also post Ghost Ship, which for people who don't know, the Ghost Ship was a major warehouse thing that burned down, like an artist warehouse, and a lot of people died. A lot of artists died in that. So we had to be careful with that stuff. And then I ended up going back to tech because I needed a job. I needed money. And I ended up getting a job as an art appraiser. And there's when I found out about NFTs and crypto. One of my coworkers was like, "You're miserable." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't want to be here. I do not like working in this. It's a warehouse environment. And it's also like the politics of corporate. It's just not fun." And so that weekend I went home and I like researched all of it, and I was like, oh my god, like this is like I was an art appraiser and authenticator, and I'm like, this is literally my job and it's going to be obsolete. And I'm like, well, I might as well start like really working on this stuff because this is the future of everything. And it kind of combines like every skill that I've had to that point in a weird way. So that was in 2021. It was right before the Beeple sale. I like to point that out that I was here before that Beeple sale. Some people use that as a like a thing. And then after that, it took like a month or so, and I sold my first piece. And then a couple months after that, my job was like, well, we need to either move you to Arizona or you have to quit. And I was starting to sell work. I was starting to come up. And I was like, F it, I quit. Like, let me take that small severance and just get out of here. And I took that and I really focused on doing this full time. And I've been doing it full time since May 2021, so 3 years now. And it's not easy, but it's I love it, and I'm here, and I've done a lot in my time in crypto art. Which I mean, like I can go into that, but that's a lot of people know that stuff. So I like to talk about the previous because I don't think people know my lore that well of how I even got here. So
Yeah, well, I was going to say that as you defined it, your lore or your story or your journey, that all of that stuff really shapes and molds you. You seem like this sort of person that's always been really intrinsically motivated to get to that next step, you know, to look after yourself. You said you've been through what sounds like very rough patches. How do you think that that has shaped you as a person, but then also led into your artwork?
I mean, I have a lot of PTSD and I have a lot of mental issues around things because I'm a survivor of a lot of bad stuff, like really bad stuff. I don't necessarily like to talk about I talk with some friends about like specifics that's happened, but like I know how triggering it can be for others who have gone through it to like really like expound on that, like the details of what's happened. So I try to just not talk about it directly. I talk about it in my art though. It definitely not all of my art because like we're like it's like I use that it is a catalyst for me. It is a point of therapy for me, but also there has to be moments where I'm not living in that mindset, where I'm not trying to do the work of like, okay, I need to fix some triggers that are coming up or memories that keep coming up. Like I can't be in that all the time. So some of my work is just irreverent and like not about that at all. And very intentionally just to give my mind a break on it all. But it's definitely shaped me wholly as there's a quote out there. It's like people don't know how much violence it takes for someone to be so kind. I think that's how the quote goes, but I always like I have a lot of anger. I have a lot of like feelings about what's happened and I put that in my art because I know what it's like necessarily to be completely on the receiving end of someone who is so broken and they take it out on the people around them. So that's like part of the reason I like obsessively make so much art because it's how it keeps me emotionally regulated. And I wouldn't like I'm some people know I can be a raging bitch sometimes, and it's like a lot of that comes into play when I'm actually not making art and like when I'm not like able to focus on at least having some sort of art practice in the day to let some of that emotion out. And then some of it too comes from when I'm navigating life now, I'm very much about consent and boundaries and fulfilling promises. So like those three things, it's like they flip a switch in me. It's like if someone crosses a boundary with me, I try to be nice at first, but if they keep trying to cross the boundary, it can get where I'm like, eh. And then when I'm like, when it's like, promises not fulfilled, I think everyone should get mad about that. Like, like that's like basic business is like doing what you say you're gonna do. So I mean, there's a lot. I mean, a lot of my day is like I have some agoraphobia. I've talked about that publicly, just like because I have experienced violence, that it's like sometimes it's really hard for me to go outside and just like deal with humans. I like the buffer of technology a lot of times, and I like um the just feeling physically safe. And so that is comes into play because I'm so in my head and in my apartment a lot. I'm just making art all the time. And um it just all leads back to making art. That's it.
No, it's really interesting. And then tell me, for the pieces that you say are irreverent and not related to, trauma or at least that sort of therapeutic aspect, where do you draw inspiration for that? Yeah, where does that come from?
Um a lot of it is, so I love cartoons a lot. Like, I mean, like, I'm a broken little girl at heart. And so I try to like give myself a lot of little kid things that like I love to do. So it's like cartoons, playing video games, just weird, like bright colors, being, just like kind of pleasing that little baby brain, that little kid in me. You know what I mean? And it's like where it's not like, okay, we need to like talk about heavy things. It's just like what looks pretty and like what looks fun. And I think number one is color for me always. Like, just I like, it was really interesting to me actually when I was in New York. I was at the Punks Under the Bridge event. I was rooming with the Punks Discord mod Chuli. I'm not a punk holder, but she invited me to like the Punks events because she's like, well, you're roommating with me, you can come, even though you're not a holder. And one of the Punks, Short Stack, I think is his name, is he brought up that women actually can see 30% more color on average than men. And I thought that was such a great little statistic as a woman artist, where it's like, maybe like sometimes I feel like people don't see or understand like everything that I'm laying down in my art, especially color wise. And I realized, well, maybe like people just can't literally see some of the colors that I can see. Not saying that like I have like super mega special vision, but it is like just in general, women can see more color. So just on the color thing, like that was an interesting antidote since New York. I've been like mulling over, like, really, women can see more color. Well, but men can actually. So I researched it because I'm like, I'm not just going to take it at face value. Men can see motion better. And then that, I mean, it just started making me think about the gender. Like, I'm always thinking about gender in a lot of ways, but like just the gender differences in the art market, like when women are buying art versus when men are buying art. And like that may play, like our biology can play a role in it, definitely, is where that tangent led me down. So yeah.
No, it's funny because that is a really nice segue to a question that I had that adds to it. You said when you were working that business, you were, selling art and appraising art. How has that experience, and then obviously, these further anecdotal bits sort of led to what you create or even what you like or what you would buy as a collector yourself? Because I know that you're a creator, but you also collect at the same time.
Yeah. So a lot of my focus on, let me answer the second question first while I'm thinking about it, because the first question I can tell the story easy. But a lot of my focus as a collector is on like very emerging like artists. Because I am an artist that has come from poverty and worked my way up through everything. um there's a certain tenacity that comes with that it's really an intangible that's really hard to explain, but it goes beyond the visuals of the art. It goes beyond like so many other things that I think people are looking for. That is, like, for me, the number one thing I'm looking for when I'm like looking for an artist. And I still, like, I've thought about it and I still can't really figure out like what that is. It's like there's a persistence, but there is a fuck you factor, like people who really just like, they're like, you know what, I don't give a shit, I'm gonna do what I want no matter what situation they're in. um and there also is like, there's a fearlessness that I like to see, but also a fragility in the art. And I think all of that is a reflection of like, I'm looking for artists who are like me, because it's like, we do that as humans. And like, I do tend to like try to support women artists, but I'm not exclusive in that, because I am a feminist. I'm that big scary word. But I'm very staunchly an intersectional feminist, where I believe it benefits everyone to have more equal everything between the sexes. And I don't think that like it should exclude men in any of the narratives or in any of it. So like, while I am a feminist and I do try to support other women a lot, I'm not like, I don't think like segregation of like, oh, I'm only going to support women helps anything. um and a lot of what I do too is like, I help artists not only financially, but there's like navigating up through all the crap, because it's daunting, and other people have helped me with that. So this kind of goes into some of my motivation as an artist and as a person, like a creator in the space. Like, talking about when I was an art appraiser, it was like I was appraising $10,000 pieces, $100,000 pieces, and then getting paid like by Bay Area standards just above minimum wage. So about like 20 something an hour, which by Bay Area, that's, you kind of are okay. Like, you're not homeless. Maybe if you have a family, you are. But if you're single, no. Um, Getting paid that, and then going home to my house in West Oakland, which was an old punk house, and literally a homeless encampment was in front of me. And I didn't hate that they were there. I actually pushed for them to be there so I could watch over them, because I was working with the community a lot, and I've done a lot of like grassroots activism around homelessness and drug stuff in West Oakland. I was like doing need like work with Punks with Lunch. I would do fundraisers with them. We would like distribute food and do like different things. So like, I'm, yes, in my backyard. So homeless people, like, I wanted that encampment there, but it was so I could watch over them, because the cops would come through and do, all their stuff. And I wanted to make sure, as someone who actually, most people didn't want them obviously there, but as someone who actually saw the humanity and what was happening, like, I was watching over them. And I had a lot of anger. I still do, at the discrepancies that I would see every day as an art appraiser. Every day, going, seeing all this money floating around with like people buying and selling things they don't. I mean, we need comfort, yes, we need culture, we need art, but at the same time, what does all of that mean when there's literally people starving in my front yard? And a lot of my early crypto art actually was centered around that. Like, I did a series, Crypto Punks with Lunch, where I fundraised for Punks with Lunch, and it's not trying to totally shit on everything that was happening here, but just trying to raise the question, when we have this much funds floating around, how can we actually help change the world and not just make rich people more rich? Um, and so that's always been, so it's like this, I've always felt like I've been in these two worlds, which gets to my name, Empress Trash, where it's like I feel like I'm navigating like these high-end elite circles, but at the same time I'm still so firmly grounded in being trailer trash, like coming from the poverty. Like, I can't, no matter what I do, I can't change where I can't come from. And what motivates me and what I'm passionate about. And um, it all plays out together in a lot of what I do. So not just my art, just a lot of what I do, because I want to, I want to win. I want millions of dollars, but I also want it to like help people. And I also Like I will like step aside $1 million if it means like a bunch of people get fed. Like cuz it's just like I'm not comfortable sitting wealthy and being like fuck them, who cares if people starve. Like I can't even when I like make enough where it's like, oh, I can have my bills paid for the next like 6 months and I'm sitting comfortable, I have money for travel, I still feel bad. Like I still feel that anger, and then I'm like, don't become that thing that you hated. It's like the number one thing I say to myself, like, don't do it. Like you can keep grinding and you can keep trying to push yourself, but do not become that, because that is, it gets back to the other question of like, how does it all shape, like how did all my experience shape me? It's like at some points all I had was myself and my conviction and my ethos and my morals and my will to keep going on. And when you are at that point in life a few times, it's like you realize like so much other stuff doesn't matter. And it's just like, I'm like, that's all you have at the end of the day. Like everything else can disappear, but being able to live with myself at the end of the day is the number one motivator for me.
So it's really interesting that you finished like that, because the word that struck me, and you said it a little while ago, was the word humanity. And it seems like you've always retained that humanity in how you operate, you know, since before I knew you in the space, and then getting to know you, and then, you know, post in all our interactions. And then also, as you mentioned, art is very, you know, art is really about how one perceives it and how they relate to it. And I've always noticed, or at least, you know, this is what sticks out to me, is a lot of humanity in your work. So let's have a look. This was your genesis on Bitcoin, Golden Moon. And even in this piece, you know, for me, it was really about the humanity of who this character or person is, and her being proud or bold or something like that. That's what really struck me. But does that weave into your work? And can you tell us about this piece?
Yeah, so I love the feminine form a lot. I'm queer, like I like all types of people. I date anyone. I've dated all, like it's that doesn't like that's not the question. But it's like some people I think wonder, and I'm like, I'm chaotic in my sexuality. Don't even ask. But I love the feminine form because I'm a woman, and I I'm trying to like, I'm a woman who survived trauma, and I'm trying to get into my body again, because when you've survived what I've survived, it's like you completely disassociate from your body. You have like there's sometimes I feel like I just like completely lose it, and I just, like you saw before we started this, I spilled my water everywhere. It's like bleh. Like I have no control of like what I'm doing, because I'm just blah, like I'm out of my body. So making art for me around women is not only like an expression of part of my sexuality, it's also like a self expression of like me trying to resolve different body whatever is going on, or emotions tied to the body, because people forget that like everything's interconnected. It's not just about the physical form of it. And so this piece, I love the moon. I'm very witchy, and I love the moon. Like I'm so in sync with the moon cycles at this point. I spent so long trying to figure out all of that over the years in my adult life. And so making work with the moon, I think it's always like an expression of like my connection to that cycle, but then also like the connection of it to femininity, and then empowering that femininity. And it also like I this gets into like how media, like I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and as a girl then growing up with no strong role models around me, the only thing I knew how to act was through media, was through what they were telling me to do, because I didn't have anything else. But I also am like, I've always been aware of this in a weird way. And I always, like, when I was younger, I would just like take it in. But then at some point in my adult life, I was like, no, 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 no. Like, this is messed up. This isn't like what real femininity is at all. This is like realistic expectations. This is like not, this is like corporations trying to spoon feed us to buy us things and manipulate us on a base level. So a lot of my work starts getting like in this piece too, it starts pushing against the idea of like perfection in a woman. And I glitch women a lot as a way to like express that and like subvert, in my mind, on a conscious and subconscious level, like that programming we have from the media around us. Like, because I do view glitch art as like, that's how I leverage it, is I try to just like disrupt subconscious patterns of thought about whatever. And like for me, I focus on women forms, which are very, very, very twisted in media. So yeah, this piece is like, you know, just like she actually has like some curves in her, and it's also using AI, which that's another huge portion of like my motivation of the work I do, is like I work with AI to make, like, for me it's like to make sure that the women being represented in it are not just being fed from the media in a way. And like there's public models, but then there's also like I can create my own like AI models and stuff. And a lot of it is just like like I don't want to say it's a form of activism. It's more of just like I feel like, well, if I don't want AI to just regurgitate Vogue magazine and porn with this like nothing against those two. I love Vogue and I love porn, but it's like I also like they're not always depicting what is real, and it's like if the AI is only feeding off of that, and then if our people aren't consciously trying to create things that are beyond that, I'm part of the problem. If I see that and I don't like try to contribute and trying to make something a little bit more realistic or a standard that is like can be achieved, then I feel like I become part of the problem at that point by apathy. So that's a huge motivation for that piece.
Yeah,
And a
no,
lot of my art.
no, I was going to say, I think that you spoke to that really well. And I guess let's have a look at the other pieces that you've dropped since becoming a partner. I can see a lot of that in there and things that we've talked about. So color and glitch, female form, the moon cycle. It's yeah, we're seeing a lot of cohesion there. Can you know, it doesn't even have to be specifically about an individual one, but certainly feel free to. Can you tell us a little bit about these? And I guess, yeah, continue that story.
Yeah, all of them definitely have the feminine form in it. And the monitor, I mean, is a favorite of mine just because I like to touch on like surveillance society a lot in my art. I think I have pieces on every chain about it. I don't necessarily like to like harp on it. It's like one of those things I just like to have a piece or two about it. Um, because we all know we're in it and it doesn't need to be reminded all the time, but I still feel like as an artist it's my obligation to make something about it. And the monitor is just about how sex is used to manipulate people to do things that they don't want to, like, that isn't necessarily for the best in them. And in the media, but then in a lot of ways. And how also like I've had a lot of tumultuous interpersonal relationships and how I can feel very controlled and monitored in them. So there's the other dynamic of it of like she's taking the power back of being the one who is monitoring in a way. Um so it's that's where my work gets really complicated because it's like it's both like criticizing it but then also an empowerment, and it Like that's what I see and that's what I'm putting into it. And I also don't necessarily talk a lot about this stuff because I want other people to like take what they want from it. Because some people may just look at it and be like, yeah, sexy lady, and that's cool. Like I'm happy for them. Like I hope they got their dopamine hit from just seeing a sexy lady. But then like part of me also hopes that like how the media uses sex to talk about like sell certain things, it's like, well, maybe they'll dive in, they'll be like, oh yeah, sexy lady, and then they'll dive in a little bit deeper and be like, whoa, there's more going on here. Maybe there's something to think about. So that's one reason the monitor. And also it's like it's the one that's my only pre-sale token. So it's like, oh, it's like she's monitoring everything going on. La Luna, I don't even remember what motivated that, to be honest. It was one of those, it was just like I made it and it was just like an intuitive, like I just need to inscribe this. I don't know. It's just I was thinking about, I think I was in like a really heady headspace thinking about just like different cycles and like, you know, the moon connection. And I think it was during Pisces season. So like anyone who knows astrology, it's just like that's a really watery emotional time. So I think I was just like gravitating towards trying to create something more spiritual, because I think that's another form of escape for me, of not necessarily escape, but like trying to like think about things in such a big picture that the things that seem overwhelming become insignificant. And I think that is kind of like the headspace I was in when I was trying to create that piece, of being like, okay, get yourself to that big like Dr. Manhattan, everything is insignificant mindset. And the other two are like the one was for NYC, like before I went to NYC. And I was just like, I just was thinking about how events always go and just like making something to kind of ground myself in that. And also just like kind of a commemorative thing of like, okay, this was for NYC. And then the Princess and the Frog, I like made that before the happening, and like I inscribed a bunch of stuff, and then I just released that one for fun. And that one was just like, I was just like, that's one where it starts getting into like it's not very much deep meaning. It was just like, I'm gonna make something about a fairy tale I liked a lot as a kid. And it's also kind of a like a Pepe nod, but not just a straight up Pepe. And like I was just like, I was thinking about like, because I love the Pepe crew so much. Like they got me started on Bitcoin forever ago, like before Gamma, like on
Mhm.
Counterparty. So I was just like thinking about that in general, and like, but also like not necessarily wanting to make a straight up Pepe. Like I was just like, I'm gonna make like a cyberpunk Princess and the Frog and see what happens. So yeah,
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 no, definitely, and you see that when you see the frog now. I think it's that culture's become so ingrained because it's so
yeah,
powerful. And as you know, obviously, La Luna is very personal to me. How do
yes,
you feel? Yeah, we had that connection. It's on Twitter, it's all public. My late daughter called Luna, and then all about the moon. So it's kind of amazing with art, how it's so powerful, or it can be so powerful for the artist. How has it felt for you over the journey putting art out that you then are putting out to collectors and buyers? I guess, how's that journey evolved for you? Perhaps, early on you were more nervous to do it, or how
um
do you feel when you put it out to the world?
for so I learned in art school. That was one thing. One of my painting teachers, John Dilge, I'll shout him out, even though he's never gonna watch this, like ever. That'd be something. But one of my painting teachers taught me is like this was later in my BFA, but he was like, once you create a piece and you decide to put it in the public, that's it. You have no control what happens at that point. You have to let go of all of your ego tied to it. You have to let go of all of your like need. And if you can't do that, don't put it in the public. Because I spent my 20s not being able to share art at all. And when he like explained it to me like that, like I have the choice, but I have to go through the mental hoops to be able to do that. Like that for me, like that's everything. And it's like, so even like to me, there's no difference in like there's a difference in minting. There's a different energy that comes with like minting stuff. But on a level of like, am I attached to something? There's no difference in me of putting it on Twitter versus minting it versus selling it. It's like once it's out, it's out. And that is just kind of it is what it is, and I can't really control it at certain points. I can like do my best to like, you know, sell my work or like, you know, just get it in front of many people as possible, but I can't really control who's going to buy it or not, or like, and or who's going to like it, or like how people are going to view it. I can defend myself if like people attack me for some reason, but I also don't feel necessarily, because I don't necessarily want to explain my art all the time. I think that kind of defends me, and that if people do like they're like oh blah 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 trying to like attack it in some way that is not a valid critique, um, in my mind, then it's just kind of like, well, I don't care, because that's your it's all a reflection of yourselves at this point, because this isn't about me. I just threw it out here, and now you all are looking in the mirror fighting with yourselves. So um yeah, I mean, like art business and art market is a totally different mindset
Mhm.
too. So I have like find it easier, I think, to actually sell other people's art than my own art. But I'm just thankful and lucky that I have people who do buy my art, and a lot of amazing fans and collectors that hype my art for me. Um, because it wouldn't like I wouldn't be able to do what I do all the time if it wasn't for that. So, um, I don't know. Yeah, does that answer the question?
No, it really does. And I think it's fascinating because you end up, because of the nature of the space, you end up with this global audience. And I think some of that was really relevant and pertinent advice for other artists. What do you think is some of the, I'm sure you've done it before because I think that you're a great role model for others. And I've seen how you interact with other artists, but what are, a couple of key things or a couple of key things that you would give advice to or teach other artists who are already in the space or perhaps looking to get into the space?
Um, don't chase the money right away. Don't chase the influencers' attention. Don't chase the fame or money, because it's not gonna get you far. Like people can tell. Um, I can tell. Like you get to a point, you're like, okay. Um, I think for me, the biggest thing is I focus on building authentic connections with people, and like I'm just really human, and I really try to put like any status aside when I'm like interacting with people, like perceived status, because to me I just know that's all like it's all numbers. It doesn't matter. Like humans are humans. And so I try my best. I'm a human too, and I fuck up sometimes, but I try my best to just like treat everyone with equal weight in their significance. Um, and I think so. I always go to that because it's just like building those relationships. They're going to sustain you way beyond anything else happening. Um, money comes. So this, my great grandma, I love her to death. I could do a whole podcast about my great grandma, RAP. She used to say to me, she's like, money, they're always making more money, but always invest in what is between you and the ground, because you can't stop gravity. And I used to think about that just like in a physical term, But then also when you're like climbing up whatever social ladders and whatever monetary ladders or whatever, there's people between you and the ground. Always invest in them. Like always. Because if you start falling for any reason, like if you were a shitbag to them trying to climb whatever fucking social ladder you're trying to climb, when you're falling down, they're gonna be like, bye, like see ya. But if you're just good to people and like you are kind to people and you're helpful to people, um, gravity isn't as bad anymore. So it helps me to be able to sustain like all those relationships, help not just money, like just sustain mentally, emotionally. And also like I get a lot of pleasure from the wins of my friends, like huge pleasure. And so because I really do view it as like we're all in this together, like we've spent now some of us years building the relationships that we've had, and there's people I know who will have my back like through thick and thin, and like that is more valuable to me on a day-to-day basis than if I had like a bajillion dollars again, because I could be sitting and having a bajillion dollars, but if I can't trust or have any connection with anyone around me, then that's a pretty sad life. And I know people who live those type of lives, and I don't want it. So yeah.
I think that is a really great place to leave it. Relationships are key, and at the end, we're all human, and it links back to what you said before about humanity. So, Empress Trash, been an absolute pleasure diving in to you and your art, and what makes you. I know we could keep chatting, but thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me and letting me ramble. Go Gamma.